They threw me out of my own son's house the day after his funeral, a cruel act that twisted the knife of grief deeper than I ever thought possible. My heart, already shattered by David's sudden passing, crumbled further under the weight of his wife Stephanie's cold, calculating words. But what they didn't know, what she could never have foreseen, was that David, my dear son, had already prepared everything for me, meticulously, silently. He saw it all coming, and in his love, he made sure I would not be lost. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is, where you are now. My life had always been one of quiet dedication. At 67, I was a retired kindergarten teacher, a profession I'd loved with every fiber of my being for 40 years. I'd seen generations of children through their first steps into learning, always putting their needs and later, David's needs first. When David and Stephanie were looking to buy their first home, they were short on the down payment. My savings, modest but diligently built, were the obvious solution. I'd contributed $40,000, a significant sum for me, knowing it would help my son start his family life on solid ground. They'd assured me it was a loan, one they'd eventually repay, though I never truly expected them to. Then, 2 years ago, when I suffered a minor fall and needed some temporary assistance, they invited me to stay with them. I thought it would be a few months, a temporary arrangement until I was fully back on my feet and could find a smaller, more accessible place of my own. I loved being close to David, cooking for them, tending to their small garden. It felt right, a comfortable rhythm, even if Stephanie always kept me at arm's length. I convinced myself it was just her way. I wanted to believe in the family I had helped to build. David's death came like a sudden, brutal storm. A massive heart attack, completely unexpected. One day he was there, strong and vibrant. The next, he was gone. The funeral was a blur of tears, sympathetic whispers, and a profound, aching emptiness. I buried my only child, a piece of my soul going into the earth with him. I stayed strong through the service, through the reception for David. I just wanted to rest, to grieve in peace. The following morning, still cloaked in the heavy fog of loss, I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea, trying to comprehend a world without my son. Stephanie walked in, dressed in a sleek black outfit, her face devoid of any visible grief. Her voice, usually sharp, was now a glacial whisper. "Eleanor," she began, not even looking at me, "I need you to be out of the house by noon. David's lawyer will be in touch about the will, but as the sole inheritor of the house, I need to begin making arrangements. You understand." My teacup clattered against the saucer, spilling hot liquid onto my hand, but I didn't feel the burn. All I could feel was the icy grip of her words. Out by noon? The day after my son's funeral? "Stephanie," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Where would I go?" "I have nowhere to go. My things—" She cut me off, her eyes finally meeting mine, but they were as cold and hard as granite. "That's not my concern. You've been here 2 years, Eleanor. It was always a temporary arrangement, wasn't it? You have your pension, your Social Security. You'll be fine. I need space to grieve, to process this, and I can't do that with you here." Her tone implied I was an obstacle to her grief, not a fellow mourner. I looked around the house, the home I had helped them buy, the garden I had nurtured. It wasn't just physical space she was denying me. It was my place in their lives, my place in David's memory. My $40,000, my sacrifices, all swept aside as if they never existed. She wanted to erase me, to pretend I was never there. The betrayal was absolute, raw, and sickening. With shaking hands, I packed a small suitcase, my mind reeling. I had nowhere to go, no family left except her, the woman who was now tearing my world apart. I called a taxi and directed it to the nearest budget hotel, a Hampton Inn. As I walked out, Stephanie stood at the door, arms crossed, watching me leave, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like triumph in her eyes. The cheap hotel room felt like a coffin. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a sickly yellow glow on the faded carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of my situation crashing down. Homeless, discarded, my son gone. I felt utterly broken, adrift. Tears flowed freely then, not just for David, but for the profound loneliness and injustice that engulfed me. I cried until there were no more tears left, until my eyes were swollen and my throat raw. But in the depths of that despair, something shifted. A tiny flicker, then a steady glow. David wouldn't have wanted this for me. He wouldn't have wanted me to be a victim, lost and without hope. I had always been strong, always resourceful. I had raised him, worked hard my entire life. I wouldn't let Stephanie break me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dignity, about honor, about justice for David. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The grief was still a heavy cloak, but underneath it, a steely resolve began to form. I wasn't just Eleanor, the grieving mother. I was Eleanor, the survivor. And I would not be silenced. I would not disappear. The call came 2 days later, a gentle voice on the other end introducing himself as Mr. Morrison, David's lawyer. He explained that David had left specific instructions regarding his will and that I was a named beneficiary, requesting my presence at his office the following week. A small spark of hope ignited in my chest. David hadn't forgotten me. I called Stephanie to inform her, and the brief conversation was taught with her barely concealed annoyance. A beneficiary? She scoffed. He must have changed it last minute. He always promised everything to me. Don't get your hopes up, Eleanor. Whatever it is, it's likely just some token. Her attempts to downplay it only strengthened my resolve. The law office was hushed, the air thick with anticipation. Stephanie arrived with her brother, Marcus, a sharp-suited man with an unnervingly smug smile, who introduced himself as a corporate lawyer and stated he was there to advise his sister. They sat across the polished mahogany table from me, Stephanie's gaze fixed on Mr. Morrison, Marcus occasionally glancing at me with a look I couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of condescension and suspicion. Mr. Morrison, a kind man with warm eyes, began to read David's will. He detailed the bulk of David's estate, the house, the 2 cars, a substantial $200,000 life insurance policy, and all of David's retirement accounts. All of it, without exception, was bequeathed to Stephanie. She preened slightly, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips, her eyes flicking towards me as if to say, "See? I told you." Marcus gave her a congratulatory nod. Then, Mr. Morrison paused, adjusting his glasses. And finally, he continued, "For David's mother, Eleanor Vance, there is a specific provision." Stephanie stiffened, her smirk vanishing. David stipulated that on the day of his will reading, Mrs. Vance is to be provided with the key and exact coordinates for a safety deposit box held at the First National Bank, downtown branch. He further specified that Mrs. Vance is to access this box alone, and any contents found therein are to be considered her sole and undisputed property. This provision was added to the will 3 months ago, after an incident David described as an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding my mother's residence. A silence fell over the room. Stephanie's face was a mask of disbelief, then fury. "A safety deposit box? What's in it?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Marcus leaned forward, his calm facade cracking slightly. "Mr. Morrison, with all due respect, is there no inventory? My sister is the primary beneficiary. She has a right to know if there are hidden assets." Mr. Morrison remained impassive. Mr. Vance's instructions were very clear. Mr. Vance's instructions were very clear, Marcus. The contents are for Mrs. Vance alone, and he wished for her to have complete privacy in their discovery. He handed me a small, heavy brass key and a card with the bank's address and box number. Stephanie tried to intimidate me the moment we stepped out of the office. "Eleanor, don't be ridiculous. Whatever David put in there, it's probably just some sentimental trinket. But if it's anything valuable, anything that affects my inheritance, I expect you to be reasonable. We are family, after all." Her sudden shift to feigned kinship was sickening. Marcus chimed in. "Mother, it would be wise to consult with family before making any hasty decisions. We can help you navigate this." Their words were transparent. They wanted to know. They wanted to control. I simply met their gazes with a newfound coolness I didn't know I possessed. David's instructions were clear. I said, my voice steady, for me and for me alone. And then I walked away, leaving them standing there, bewildered and frustrated. The next morning, I went to the First National Bank. My hands trembled slightly as I presented the key and card to the vault manager. He led me through a heavy steel door into a cavernous room filled with rows of metal boxes. The one I needed was a larger unit, something that immediately piqued my curiosity. Why such a large box for a sentimental trinket? He brought it to a private viewing room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the unknown. As I inserted the key and lifted the lid, my breath hitched. Inside, nestled among layers of tissue paper, were not trinkets, but a thick, bound leather journal, several crisp envelopes, and a neatly organized file folder labeled Documentation. My fingers trembled as I picked up the topmost envelope. It was addressed to me in David's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Mom," it began. As I read, tears streamed down my face, but these were tears of profound love and a dawning understanding. David had known. He had seen it all. The letter explained everything. He had rented this safety deposit box 5 years ago, shortly after he and Stephanie bought the house. He had been quietly observing Stephanie's behavior, her increasing materialism, her casual cruelty, the way she would subtly undermine me, and her subtle attempts to isolate me. He realized his initial trust in her was misplaced. He wrote about how my $40,000 down payment, which he'd seen Stephanie dismiss as just a small amount, had weighed on his conscience. He had taken that money, my money, and secretly invested it in a diversified portfolio in name, diligently managing it himself. The accompanying investment statements showed the initial $40,000 had grown through careful investment and compound interest to a staggering $185,000. My heart swelled, not just with relief, but with overwhelming gratitude for his foresight. But there was more. The documentation folder was a chilling revelation. It contained printouts of text messages between Stephanie and Marcus, emails, and meticulously detailed financial records. David had documented Stephanie's lavish spending, a $15,000 spree in 1 month alone on designer clothes and accessories, hidden from him. He had screenshots of text messages where Stephanie complained about my presence, calling me a burden and an old nag, even as I cooked and cleaned for them. Most damningly, he had uncovered their plan, text conversations detailing how Stephanie and Marcus intended to declare me mentally incompetent to gain access to my pension and Social Security once David was gone, effectively making me completely reliant on them while stripping me of my autonomy. He had added the will provision about the box just 3 months before his death, after overhearing a particularly nasty argument Stephanie had about me with Marcus, where she had called me a, quote, parasite. David wrote that he couldn't confront Stephanie without destroying their marriage, but he couldn't let her harm me. He'd been protecting me, silently, from beyond the grave. The feeling of being discarded, of being a burden, evaporated, replaced by a surge of righteous indignation. The quiet resolve I'd felt in the hotel room solidified into unshakable purpose. David hadn't just left me money, he'd given me my dignity back, a voice, and undeniable proof of Stephanie's true nature. My preparation now was about deciding how to use this truth. I spent the next few days in my hotel room, poring over every document, every text, every email. I highlighted the most egregious examples, creating a mental map of Stephanie's deceit. This wasn't just about my $40,000 anymore. It was about the profound disrespect, the manipulation, and the blatant attempt to exploit an elderly, grieving woman. I was no longer a heartbroken victim. I was an avenging angel, armed with my son's love and meticulous evidence. During this time, Stephanie's calls and texts escalated. She was desperate to know about the box. "Eleanor, I really think we should talk about what David left you. As his wife, I'm entitled to know if there's anything valuable." Or, "I'm worried about you, Mom. Are you really sure you can handle whatever David put in there? You know how confused you sometimes get. The thinly veiled threats and condescension only fueled my determination. She even had Marcus call, trying to pressure me into a family meeting to discuss the contents of the box. They didn't realize they were just providing more evidence of their true character, playing right into the trap David had laid. A week later, I calmly called Stephanie. I'd like to come over to the house. There are some things we need to discuss, face to face. Her voice held a note of triumph. Oh, finally ready to be reasonable, are we? Fine, come over this afternoon. Just you, Eleanor. No lawyers. I smiled faintly. Just me. I arrived at the house I had once called home, the house I had helped them buy, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the porch. Stephanie met me at the door, her smile brittle, forced. She tried to usher me into the living room, but I walked straight to the kitchen table, the very spot where she had evicted me. I pulled out a chair, set my handbag on the table, and pulled out the journal, the investment statements, and the documentation folder. Stephanie's eyes widened at the sight of the organized papers. What is all this, Eleanor? Are you trying to cause trouble? She said, her voice laced with a tremor of unease. I looked directly at her, my voice calm, steady, devoid of emotion. No, Stephanie, I'm not causing trouble. I am simply presenting the truth David left for me to find. I opened the journal. This is David's journal. He started it 5 years ago. He chronicled everything. Your words, your actions, your schemes. I picked up the investment statements. Remember that $40,000 I gave you for the down payment on this house? The money you dismissed as just a small amount? David took that money, invested it, and grew it to over $185,000, all in an account in my name. He made sure I would always be financially secure, despite your best efforts. I slid the statements across the table. Her eyes darted to the figures, then back to me, her face pale. Now, for the documentation folder. I continued, my voice gaining strength. David knew you were planning to declare me incompetent. He had screenshots of your text messages with Marcus, discussing how you would access my pension and Social Security once he was gone. I showed her the printed texts. Her mouth fell open, her eyes wide with shock and fear. He also documented your lavish spending, I said, displaying credit card statements. $15,000 in 1 month, Stephanie, on designer clothes and frivolous items, while you constantly complained about me being a burden on your finances. I read aloud a particularly venomous text where she called me a, quote, parasite. Stephanie stared at the papers, at my unwavering gaze, her carefully constructed world of lies crumbling around her. Her face, which had been so cold and composed at David's funeral, was now a portrait of utter devastation. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's not true. He wouldn't. He loved me. He loved you enough to marry you, I countered, but he loved me enough to protect me. He saw through your manipulation, Stephanie. He knew your heart was ruled by greed. He saw how you treated me, how you planned to exploit me once he was gone. He even documented the unfortunate misunderstanding regarding my mother's residence, your eviction of me, the day after his funeral. She recoiled as if struck, the color draining from her face. The bravado, the cunning, the entitlement, it all evaporated. She looked from the papers to me, then to the empty chair where David would have sat. The full weight of David's knowledge, his quiet observations, his enduring love for his mother crushed her. She had been so confident, so cruel, thinking she had won everything. But David had played a longer game, a more loving game, and she had lost the only thing that truly mattered, her moral standing and any shred of respect. Stephanie, stripped of all pretense, all dignity, let out a choked sob. She didn't collapse physically, but her spirit crumpled right there in front of me. She saw herself, exposed through David's eyes, and the realization was more devastating than any financial loss. She still had the house, the cars, the life insurance, the retirement accounts, all of David's material wealth. But I had something far more valuable. My son's enduring love, my dignity, and the profound peace of knowing justice had been served. I stood up, gathering my papers. I'm leaving now, Stephanie. I'm financially secure, thanks to David, and I'm free of you. I walked out, not with glee, but with a profound sense of closure and peace. I didn't want her inheritance. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice, and David had delivered it. I found a lovely small condo overlooking a park, a quiet, serene place where I could truly grieve and rebuild my life, surrounded by David's love, not Stephanie's shadow. The view of the sunset from my new balcony is beautiful, a daily reminder of the light that follows darkness. Justice isn't always about taking everything from someone. Sometimes it's about reclaiming everything for yourself. David's legacy wasn't just money. It was freedom, self-respect, and the enduring power of a mother-son bond that even death and deceit could not sever. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.